went up faster than Jimmy Carter. Some Democrats say, oh, well, supply side economics didn't work. You cut tax rates and that's why the deficits went up. That's wrong. Supply side economics works to a certain extent. When they cut marginal rates during the 1980s, revenue did rise. The problem was spending rose even faster, so the deficits were from spending. Now some say as Republicans, well, we just cut that welfare queen off. If we cut her off, we'll balance the budget. It won't work. There's just not enough money. There's not enough welfare money. And we did reform welfare a little bit under Clinton when we had the Republicans in Congress in Clinton. We did do some reform of welfare. Could there be more? Yes. But you will never come close to balancing the budget just by kicking people off of welfare. It's also just not real popular to go around the country saying, I just want to beat up on poor people. And that's how we've probably gotten and shrunken as a party. What you have to acknowledge, though, is you cannot be a Republican who simply says that everything that goes to the Pentagon is justified and that everything has to be spent on the Pentagon. If we do not acknowledge that there's waste in the military budget, if we do not acknowledge that we have to reassess our foreign policy, we will never come close to balancing the budget. And if you disagree on that and you say, no, we have to be everywhere all the time, we have to have 750 military bases around the world and troops in 130 countries, it's our job as the leader of the free world, that's fine. But once you accept that position, realize that you cannot be a fiscal conservative because we spend so much money that we're bankrupting our country, and a lot of it, maybe up to 40% of it, is on these expenditures. Depends on how you measure it, but a lot of people measure it out to be as much as 40%. Does this mean we have to be against national defense? No, I think government should work on enumerated rights. I think the primary enumerated right in the Constitution is national defense. So I think we can be strong on national defense and say, yes, we do. I believe in a much smaller budget, but of that budget I might spend 80% on national defense because I think it's a primary function of federal government. But it would be much smaller. The number would be much smaller than what we spend on military now. There was a Grace report 30 years ago that talked about $500 hammers, $200 wrenches. During the Iraq War, we gave Halliburton a $1 billion no-bid contract. That is just foolhardy. There was one company that got a contract in Iraq to refurbish an Olympic pool, and all the fittings were rusted out. Well, you know what they did? They spray painted them silver. $1 million. They got caught. But just think of all the people who weren't getting caught. Look at, I don't know if this was Halliburton or not, but look at our GIs who died shocked in the shower by crappy electrical work done by shoddy contractors that weren't getting enough oversight. You know, maybe those are just accidents that will happen at any time, but it really annoys me that these kids volunteer to go there and then somebody's getting rich off the system. And this doesn't mean you have to be a liberal or that I'm some kind of person who doesn't believe in national defense. All you have to do is go back to General Eisenhower. He was the one who warned when he left. Here's a famous general who nobody thinks is some left-wing crazy. Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex. He says your policy, your foreign policy, should not be directed by people who are making money off the system. So if Halliburton's making $1 billion off the system, we don't want them giving money to politicians and persuading them either to go to war or to have analysis of the situation which is incorrect. You know, I don't know whether Dick Cheney was honest or not, but he was the president of Halliburton and made $100 million personally from Halliburton. Not when he was president, but before. Dick Cheney in 1993, there's a great YouTube of him saying what a disaster it would be to go into Iraq. He was justifying the first George Bush for not going into Iraq. And there's a great YouTube of him saying exactly what would happen. There'd be civil war, there'd be chaos, it'd be expensive, we'd have no exit strategy. So Dick Cheney acknowledged this until he worked for Halliburton for 8 years and then went back into government. But we have to acknowledge there can be some disagreement with Republicans on these things, and you might not agree with all of that, but at least think about it in the sense that if we want to be fiscal conservatives, if we do believe in balance the budget, we have to think a little bit about our foreign policy and whether or not we can have a strong defense without always having troops in everybody's war in everybody's country. I'd like to conclude by letting you know that we have a website. If you ever want to look at our website and see what we believe on any of the different issues, it's randpaul2010.com, and you're welcome to come by anytime. We are very excited with this. We're not sure exactly which direction it's going to finally take, but my gut belief is that Bunning eventually will drop out, and this is going to be a 2-, 3-, 4-person race. And a group like this, that if you decided to help me, could be incredibly important, because we're talking about winning a primary with 40,000 votes. 40,000 votes sometimes wins a city commission race in Louisville. So you're talking about your vote is incredibly important in a primary because a primary is very small. There's 1 million registered Republicans in Kentucky, but when Billy Harper, Northrop, and Fletcher ran, only 130,000 people voted. So if we have a four-way race, you could see someone like myself who's an outsider that maybe the muckety-mucks who think they control everything wouldn't like might come in. One of the things I propose some Republicans wouldn't like is I think if you get any contract, I'm not talking about military, any government contract worth more than $1 million, you have to sign a clause as part of the contract saying I voluntarily agree not to lobby Congress during the terms of my contract. I voluntarily agreed not to give contributions. Now, we tried campaign finance reform with McCain-Feingold, but the problem with McCain-Feingold was I have a tax group. They told me it was illegal. It's illegal for me to criticize my congressman within 60 days of the election. Well, that tramples on the First Amendment. McCain-Feingold is awful, but this would be a voluntary clause. You can have an agreement with anybody, and if you want to take the money, you just have to agree not to lobby. The biggest galling thing is that Halliburton can get $1 billion and immediately turn around and spend $1 million on a lobbyist who's, please sir, can I have some more? You know, I mean, it's just an endless cycle of abuse that we have to stop. I think that's an idea that might resonate with independents and moderates. We have to find a way to have issues that appeal to a broader audience than just us. So I think there are ways someone like myself could appeal to a broader audience in a general election. I think we'll give a good go of it. But I thank you for inviting me, and I'll take any questions now.